This part was prepared by Mikalos Romeris University in Lithuania.
Law, regulation, and child protection system. Let's take a closer look at what we know about human rights. Everyone, everywhere has the same rights as a result of our common humanity. We are all equally entitled to our human rights without discrimination. Human rights belong to each and every one of us equally. All individuals are equal as human beings and by virtue of the inherent dignity of each human person. All human beings are entitled to their human rights without discrimination of any kind, such as race, color, sex, ethnicity, age, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, disability, property, birth, or other status as explained by the human rights treaty bodies. Are human rights valid for children? Are human rights valid for children? Children and young people have the same general human rights as adults and also specific rights that recognize their special needs. Children are neither the property of their parents, nor are they helpless objects of the charity. They are human beings and are the subject of their own rights. Why have children's rights been singled out in a separate human rights convention? Children start life as totally dependent beings. Children must rely on adults for the nurture and guidance they need to grow towards independence. Such nurture is ideally found from adults in children's families, but when primary adult caregivers cannot meet their children's needs, it is up to the state as the primary duty bearer to find an alternative in the best interests of the child. The actions or inactions of government impact children more strongly than any other group in society. Transformation of the family structure, globalization, climate change, digitalization, mass migration, shifting employment patterns, and a shrinking social welfare net in many countries all have strong impacts on children. The impact of these changes can be particularly devastating in situations of armed conflict and other emergencies. Because they are still developing, children are especially vulnerable, more so than adults, to poor living conditions such as poverty, inadequate health care, nutrition, safe water, housing, and environmental pollution. The effects of disease, malnutrition, and poverty threaten the future of children, and therefore the future of the societies in which they live. What is the Convention on the Rights of the Child? In 1989, world leaders made a historic commitment to the world's children by adopting the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, an international agreement on childhood. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is an international treaty that recognizes the human rights of children defined as persons up to the age of 18 years. It has become the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history and has helped transform children's lives around the world. The Convention on the Rights of the Child sets out the rights that must be realized for children to develop to their full potential. The Convention recognizes the fundamental human dignity of all children and the urgency of ensuring their well-being and development. It makes clear the idea that a basic quality of life should be the right of all children, rather than a privilege enjoyed by a few. While laying down common standards, the Convention takes into account the different cultural, social, economic, and political realities of individual states, so that each state may seek its own means to implement the rights common to all. There are two ways for a state to become a party: by signature and ratification, or by accession. By ratifying the Convention, states commit to undertaking all appropriate legislative, administrative, and other measures for the full realization of the rights it contains. How is the Convention on the Rights of the Child implemented and monitored? The main way the Convention is enforced is through ongoing monitoring by an independent team of experts called the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child. Governments that ratify the Convention or one of its optional protocols must report to the committee, which is made up of 18 experts in the field of children's rights from different countries and legal systems. They are nominated and elected by states parties, but act in a personal capacity, not as representatives of their countries. Reports to the committee outline the situation of children in the country and explain the measures taken by the state to realize their rights. In reviewing states' reports, the committee looks at how well governments are setting and meeting the standards for the realization and protection of children's rights as outlined in the Convention or Optional Protocol. In its reviews, the committee provides implementation and improvement recommendations to each individual state, which it will review the next time the country is examined. How does the Convention on the Rights of the Child define a child? The Convention defines a child as a person below the age of 18, unless the relevant laws recognize an earlier age of majority. On some issues, states are obliged to provide for minimum age, such as the age for admission into employment and completion of compulsory education. In other cases, the Convention is clear in prohibiting life imprisonment without possibility of release or capital punishment for those under 18 years of age. What is the vision of the child in the Convention on the Rights of the Child? The Convention provides a universal set of standards to be adhered to by all countries and reflects a new vision of the child. Children are neither the property of their parents, nor are they helpless objects of charity. They are human beings, and they are the subject of their own rights. The Convention offers a vision of the child as an individual and a member of a family and a community, with rights and responsibilities proper to his or her age and stage of development. How is the Convention on the Rights of the Child special? It is the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history, enforced in virtually all countries of the world, thus providing a common ethical and legal framework for the realization of children's rights. It was the first time a formal commitment was made to ensure the realization of child rights and monitor progress on the situation of children. It indicates that children's rights can no longer be perceived as an option, as a question of favor or kindness to children, or as an expression of charity. Children's rights generate obligations and responsibilities that we all must honor and respect. What are the Convention's guiding principles? There are 4 general principles enshrined in the Convention. These are meant to help with the interpretation of the Convention as a whole and thereby guide national programs of implementation. The 4 principles are formulated in particular in Articles 2, 3, 6, and 12. State parties must ensure that all children within their jurisdiction enjoy their rights. No child should suffer discrimination. This applies to every child, irrespective of the child's or his or her parents' or legal guardian's race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic or social origin, property, disability, birth or other status. The essential message is equality of opportunity. Girls should be given the same opportunities as boys. Refugee children, children of foreign origin, children of indigenous or minority groups should have the same rights as all others. Children with disabilities should be given the same opportunity to enjoy an adequate standard of living. When the authorities of a state take decisions which affect children, the best interests of children must be a primary consideration. This principle relates to decisions by courts of law, administrative authorities, legislative bodies, and both public and private social welfare institutions. This is a fundamental message of the Convention, the implementation of which is a major challenge. The Right to Life article includes formulations about the right to survival and to development, which should be ensured to the maximum extent possible. The term development in this context should be interpreted in a broad sense, adding a qualitative dimension. Not only physical health is intended, but also mental, emotional, cognitive, social, and cultural development. Children should be free to have opinions in all matters affecting them, and those views should be given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the child. The underlying idea is that children have the right to be heard and to have their views taken seriously, including in any judicial or administrative proceedings affecting them. What are the key points of the Convention? Every child has the inherent right to life, and states shall ensure to the maximum child survival and development. Every child has the right to a name and nationality from birth. Children shall not be separated from their parents, except by competent authorities for their well-being. States shall protect children from physical or mental harm and neglect, including sexual abuse and exploitation. Parents have the primary responsibility for a child's upbringing, but states shall provide them with appropriate assistance and develop childcare. States shall provide parentless children with suitable alternative care institutions. Disabled children shall have the right to special treatment, education, and care. Children are entitled to the highest attainable standard of health. Primary education shall be free and compulsory. Discipline in schools shall respect the child's dignity. Children shall have time to rest and play and equal opportunities for cultural and artistic activities. States shall protect children from economic exploitation and from work that may interfere with their education or be harmful to their health or well-being. States shall protect children from the illegal use of drugs and involvement in drug production or trafficking. Capital punishment or life imprisonment shall not be imposed for crimes committed before the age of 18. Children in detention shall be separated from adults. They must not be tortured or suffer cruel or degrading treatment. No child under 15 shall take any part in hostilities. Children exposed to armed conflict shall receive special protection. Children of minority and indigenous populations shall freely enjoy their own culture, religion, and language. Children who have suffered mistreatment, neglect, or exploitation shall receive appropriate treatment of training for recovery and rehabilitation. Children involved in infringements of the penal law shall be treated in a way that promotes their sense of dignity and worth and aims at reintegrating them into society. States shall make the rights set out in the Convention widely known to both adults and children. In general, protecting the child from all forms of violence is one of the objectives of the Convention. The Convention on the Rights of the Child applies almost worldwide. However, each country has its own system for protecting the rights of the child, and each country implements the provisions of the Convention in different ways where possible. The committee calls on states to prohibit corporal punishment of children by law. Prohibition of corporal punishment is a crucial part of the child rights protection system. Here is a list of countries that have legislated against corporal punishment of children. Please check whether this list includes the country where you live. It's great if you found your country. Now compare how quickly a political and legal decision to protect a child from violence was taken in your country. Do you see any countries on the list that have legislated against hitting children before the Convention on the Rights of the Child was established? Why do you think states have adopted such a ban at different times? Do you know what the child protection system is like in your country? To learn different children protection systems of several countries, you can check our info pack.